You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 48. Today I'll be talking to Tiffany Bozic. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Tiffany Bozic. It's funny, Tiffany is actually the person who has been most requested by other guests, so it's great to finally have a chance to talk with her. Tiffany's focus is predominantly on animals and the natural world, but as we talk about, she's usually not trying to create scientifically accurate depictions alone. I mean, that's definitely part of it, but rather she uses them as storytelling devices. Her work is this interesting mix of science, nature, and surrealism. We talk about that, we talk about growing up in rural Arkansas, her recent book project, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Tiffany Bozic. Tiffany, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
It is such an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
All right. And so I literally just told you this, but you have had the most other guests request to have you on than any other guest that I've had. Zoe Keller, Chris Mrozek, and Jane Kim all recommended that I have you on. So before I dive into your background, how does that feel just to have that sort of appreciation and love from your peers?
Beautiful and humbling and I feel really grateful. That's just, I don't know, gives me warm fuzzies. It's really nice. Thank you.
Awesome. So diving into your background a little bit, you were born and grew up in a rural area of Arkansas. I think Russellville is the name of the town, specifically on a goat farm, I think.
Yeah.
So is that what your parents did for a living when you were growing up? Were they farmers?
So both of my parents actually grew up in Cleveland. I'll give you, I don't know how much you want to dive into this one, but I think it's one of the things that makes me a little unique. So my mom grew up in Pinkley, Ohio, which is like a rural suburb of Cleveland. And my father grew up in the fighting rings. His father was a professional wrestler. He lost his mom really young, so he just traveled around with his father in the fighting rings. And then when they met each other, they came up with this great idea to just stop what they were doing. She was a school teacher and he was an electrician, and just move down to Arkansas and buy a ridiculously cheap plot of land. And they thought that if they got 350 goats and started their own dairy farm, that they'd be able to swing it, both working full time. My father was still traveling up to, he was traveling all around, but mostly in Alaska for 3-4 months at a time. And my mom was still trying to teach full time in Arkansas public schools. And I'm the youngest of 3. So, I was raised by goats completely. They were never home. So, and I think that really instilled a love for animals because they felt like family to me growing up. And I just felt really intimately bonded to them. And we had Arabian horses and all the other farm animals that you could think of: pigs, cows, chickens, turkeys. And so we had 42 acres up on top of this beautiful mountaintop. And I mean, it really was just an extraordinary experience because I had so much freedom, you know.
So is nature something that you even enjoyed and appreciated even at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, completely. It was, my everything. It was my world, my church, my friends, it was my family. It meant the world to me. And so, I mean, it just became so integral to who I am. Unfortunately, my parents worked so hard to make it work, but by the time I was 5 or 6, they just lost the farm, and we just had to pack up 2 trucks and just abandon the farm. We moved back up to Cleveland. And then my parents, for the rest of my childhood, continued to work. My mom was as hard as they could. So my mom was like teaching during the day, and then she'd deliver pizzas at night, and a whole bunch of just funny jobs. My dad was often laid off in the local 38 electrical union. So it was just a tumultuous time. But when we moved up to Cleveland, we moved to a suburb called Strongsville. And it was a suburbia, but it backed up on farmland. And so I would still, like, in the morning, make myself a peanut butter and jelly, put it in my back pocket, and just be gone all day. I would follow like little streams through neighborhoods and farms and follow animals and draw in my notebooks. So
did that help the transition from like rural, very kind of a rural upbringing to living in a very urban environment? Did that help bridge that gap, just still being relatively close to nature?
Absolutely. I think so. And, we always had an inappropriate amount of pets growing up as well. I mean, true to the Ohio stereotype. I had turtles, pet chickens, aquariums. My mom, when she was home, she was always taking us to these like pet shows. So we grew up with parrots, and I had a pet fox, which is just wrong. I mean, it was just an extraordinary experience to be that close to animals growing up, but it was also like, I don't know, we didn't have probably as much bandwidth as we needed to probably take care of all those beautiful creatures. So
how did you first take an interest in the arts? You mentioned that was how you spent a lot of your time. How did that first spark in you?
I think that we have, I hate to use the word talent, but we have like some creative spark, I guess I could call it, a matrilineal side. My mother's mother actually studied architecture and art at the Cleveland Institute of Art, and one of her teachers was Picasso.
Oh, wow.
Which is interesting. But my mother was an extraordinary artist had she had the opportunity to really hone that gift. My sister and my brother were really talented as well, but I really, it defined who I was. I think we all start this life really creative and just drawing and painting or, building things. And I just never stopped, and I was like 4 years old. I remember having a very profound realization when I was 4 years old. And I remember standing on the mountaintop in Arkansas and looking down at this pond we had and just knowing that someday I was going to travel the world and own my own business and make paintings. And I just knew it. Like as if it had already happened. And I always just kind of kept that as my guiding light, like it was a fact. This is what I was supposed to be doing. So
it's amazing that you realized that so young, just that specific path. Yeah,
I agree with you because I didn't know any artists growing up. I mean, Ohio, I knew Bob Ross. that was my little art hero. And I remember as a little girl, we'd have a trip to the Cleveland Museum of Art once a year or something. And I remember seeing Henry Rousseau on the wall. And he made these really kind of basic, almost painterly, very rudimentary paintings of jungle scenes with tiger attacking a buffalo or something. And just the way that the artists just translated their emotions to the canvas. I just thought that I see like that. I experienced the world like that. And it just seemed like a truth.
Is it something that your parents encouraged in you? Were they supportive of your interest in the arts?
I think my parents, when they had time, my mom especially, she thought that I was going to be the next Dolly Parton. Like, she wanted me to pursue the fiddle and keep writing music and everything. And I just am so extremely inspired by music, how emotional it is. I love how it appeals to just like the human condition and just the heart so much. But I'm also very, in general, very quiet. And so being on stage like that, I don't know if that would work for me. So I really just wanted to create this triangle in my life between like science, nature, and poetry and art, and really like music. If I could like learn to paint like music and find like a universal language to really address like the human experience by using animals. I will say that like, I love, they call it music a universal language, right? And I just wanted to try to find a language with, in a 2D realm where I can kind of pick apart what that means in each individual's heart and how we just have so much in common with all living things on this planet. And it, I don't know, it just like widens my lens and helps me see the world and through a different filter. And I didn't want to anthropomorphize the animals that I'm featuring. It was more just like the more that we understand about the natural world, the more we understand about ourselves and our place in it.
So when it came time to go to school, for the first year, you went to Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah, it was the only school that I applied to. I didn't know what my options were.
I guess what brought you there? I mean, is that just because it was relatively close to Cleveland?
Yeah, I think it was really close. But, you know, my parents were just so busy that they never asked me for a report card, or they were never really around. And, you know, I grew up with just like so much physical and mental abuse. My family is just riddled with addiction. So I just needed to get away from that. And unfortunately, my parents weren't in a position to help me at all. So I was trying to get a scholarship. I applied to the Columbus College of Art and Design, and fortunately, I got a scholarship for half the tuition. So I went down to there for about 2 years, and I absolutely loved it. I got a really beautiful like foundation for illustration, structural drawing, and history and marketing, and, you know, just the basics. And I really loved it. But I dropped out after 2 years for two reasons. One, I just absolutely couldn't afford it. I was like trying to go to school, trying to pay for all the supplies myself and the tuition, all the student loans. And I was also bussing tables and doing everything else that students do, or they're trying to make it through. And I just couldn't do it. It was just so hard, so stressful. And I really wanted to combine my love for like painting and biology, but I didn't want to be a scientific illustrator. I didn't want to be an illustrator. I didn't know what that meant. And so I just didn't find my path at school at that time. So, you know, I think I was still like hearing at that time, and from what I hear from younger people to younger artists having gone through school, that like painting wildlife was just kind of a no-no in fine art, but I didn't care. It was just all I was interested in doing. So I dropped out. And that first year after school, I took a bus all the way out to Portland. I lived there for a summer. I loved it. Came back for another year. And then I drove out to San Francisco, where I had a couple high school buddies living on Treasure Island. And I just took a job at an art store and a medical assistant and a marketing agency, just trying to like just chip away and support myself. And the idea was I would just start sharing my work in group shows and just one painting at a time, and just build momentum from there until I could slowly, like, I'm probably jumping ahead on your questions here.
No worries. So after kind of leaving school and going to San Francisco, was the remainder of kind of you developing your style, was that all kind of self-taught? And I guess in the absence of the rest of what school would have been, how did you go about developing your craft and kind of doing that organically yourself?
That's a good question. So I really did feel and continue to feel like, gosh, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know, you know? So at that time, I would just spend a lot of time in the library because I just had to learn as much as I could about the natural world and art and try to figure out how to hone my craft. I mean, I really did want to become someday like really good at what I do. I wanted to like be technically a master someday. That was my goal. And I knew it was just going to take decades. But so yeah, I would spend lots of time in gardens and zoos and mostly the library. But then I also started going to the Academy of Science and meeting some of the scientists there and looking at the collections. But that was like, I think I moved to San Francisco in 1999 and I was like 18 years old. And then by like 2000, I met John Tripp, who ran fecalface.com in San Francisco, which at the time was just like an online art website that highlighted kind of the whole San Francisco underground graffiti skateboard art scene. And I kind of just fell into that crowd and I became friends with so many incredible artists. Nice. They just blew my mind. Most of them are art school graduates, but what I was really just energized by just how much diversity there was. There was like, a lot of them were tattoo artists. I'm thinking of Mike Giant, Jeremy Fish, Damon Soul, Kinsey Disford, Shepard Fairey, and so many just amazingly talented people. And some of them took me under their wing. So I learned a lot from them. A lot about like how to also show paintings in galleries. And, you know, a lot of them too were really good at merchandising and marketing too. And they would make skateboards and t-shirts and all these other things. And at that time, that was great, you know. Yeah. So I did a couple t-shirts for like Upper Playground and a couple snowboards for like maybe Burton and a skateboard for my friend Jesse Van Rockout at that time. But I don't know how to word it. I feel like it was really important in the beginning to just try so many different things. Because at this point, I just didn't know where I wanted it to go. So the idea was that I would just try everything and then whatever didn't feel right, I would just kind of chip that corner off of the block. And by the time I was 80, I'd be a really smooth stone, right? So it was just a really fun adventure, I think, running around with so many cool like artists and scientists and inventors and designers. So when I kind of stumble on that word self-taught, because I just feel like I did and continue to just learn from so many people. Sure. You know, I mean, I might not be in an academic sense, but
it sounds like those lessons had to have been more valuable than what you probably would have been taught in school. I mean, a lot of the things like merchandising and how to actually market your work. Like I hear from people that I've talked to that go to art school that come out not knowing those things and feeling like, hey, I don't know how to apply all the things that I learned to a real world. But you were learning those things by these people, right?
Absolutely. And I think by like 2001, I was supporting myself as an artist in San Francisco. 100% off of my work. So I think that it was a profound lesson on how to give it everything you've got and try different things. I mean, that's a wide criticism I've heard for the last couple decades, how maybe art schools aren't always the best at setting their students up for supporting themselves with loan debt, you know? And I was really intimidated by that because I didn't want, knowing how hard I was working to just try to get through school. I was intimidated to how was I going to find my voice as an artist and experiment and feel totally comfortable with making mistakes and just bombing, which is the reality of what it takes to start out. Like, how was I going to do that, but also have loans on top of rent and car payments and utilities and all these other things? So I was like, well, I might as well just drop out of school and just like, then at least I don't have that putting pressure on me as well, you know? Yeah. So,
I mean, in retrospect, it was the right choice, it seems. So
it was absolutely the right choice for me. I think I learned so much.
So how did you start like getting your work in front of galleries and actually start showing your work in a more formal setting?
I was working at a marketing agency for 6 months in San Francisco. I just met somebody who got me to get the job. I was zero qualified for this job, but I did learn a lot. And I do think that marketing is a fascinating subject. But they, of course, in 2001, San Francisco, it just bombed like every other business at the time, .com at the time. So all these beautiful old brick buildings in downtown Soma, San Francisco were empty all of a sudden. And I pitched it to my old bosses, like, it's just sitting here empty. Is it cool if I just put on an art show? And they're like, they were so cool about it. They said, yeah, sure, why not? So I just found 20 different artists in San Francisco, and we all pitched in and had a group show. It was super fun. I put a few of my paintings in it, just why not, right? And one of the people who came to the show was John Tripp with Fecal Face. And he's like, well, hey, I'm having a show, a group show in the city next month or two. Do you want to put a couple pieces in there? And I said, absolutely. And from that point, I put a couple paintings in a show. And if one would sell, like one painting out of 4, I took it as a sign that I could pay my rent for that month, right? And it just kind of gained momentum for the next couple years. And then at that point, I started showing a couple paintings down in LA. So it became a back and forth. I think in like 2002, I put a whole bunch of paintings in a group show with Shepard Fairey's gallery. I think it might have been Black Market at the time. I'm trying to remember. But then Gabe Scott was the curator of 111 Minna in 2002. And I had participated in a few different group shows at 111 Minna. And he's like, hey, if you want it, I'll give you a whole solo show.
Nice.
But it's massive. I don't remember the square footage of the space, but it was like, I mean, it makes me sweaty thinking about it. It was a massive gallery space. And he's like, do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a dream come true. So many artists that I aspired to be like had shown there. And I was like, okay, well, the only way that I could do this is to just paint basically like 12 hours a day. But I can't work and support myself in San Francisco. So I called up my dad and I was like, Dad, can I just move to the back room in his dumpy little house and just paint all the time? And he's like, okay. And I was like, but here's the deal. Leave me alone because this is all I'm going to do. He's like, okay. So I drove all the way back and to Ohio. And that's what I did. I just lived in this tiny little room and I went to the library for I would sleep until noon. And I'd go to the library for 4 hours just to do research to figure out what I was going to paint. And then I would just paint from 4 o'clock until like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. Like,
wow.
That's all I did. And it was a very unhealthy experience that I never want to relive. But I created enough paintings to fill the gallery. And then from there, when I had that show, which is really successful and amazing and a dream come true, that I even survived that period. Then I was invited to show down at Kinsey Disforge Gallery, which was probably Black Market at the time, if I'm thinking about it. And that was down in Culver City, LA. And then I started having solo shows with them, one after another. And I think I was represented by them for maybe 6, 7, 8 years. And then I started showing with Joshua Liner Gallery in New York for about 9 or 10 years. So it was just for the past like 15, 16 years, just been solo shows and back to back to back. It just kind of worked out, you know?
Yeah. And so around that time or a little bit before kind of you hooked up with Joshua Liner Gallery, you had a residency at the California Academy of Sciences. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. How did that opportunity come about?
Oh, it's by far my favorite show I've ever had. I loved that experience so much. Let's see. So that was like 2005. Let me just back up a little bit. 2005. One of my dear friends, Lindsay Irving, living in the city, had a job there. And she introduced me to Jack Dumbacher. And her and I would sit around and just lament about like how amazing the collection is. And wouldn't it be incredible if we could create a way to bring more artists into the collection, to inspire them to engage with the natural world. So I tried to help them come up with this pilot program to bring an artist in. But then after like a year, they invited me to do it. They're like, you're clearly the person for the job at the time. So I stepped up to it. It was amazing. But so I started working with Dr. Rich Mui, who is an invertebrate zoology and geology curator. And I kind of just shadowed him and listened to a lot of his stories and explored the collections for about a year. And I created 5 large paintings based on some of the stories that I was trying to translate about the collections and the deep sea. And then I also teamed up with Bart Shepard, who was the director of the Steinhardt Aquarium. And we created really surreal aquariums with some of the creatures that I highlighted in my paintings on the public floor in an exhibit at the temporary Academy Science Building on like Howard and Fifth. And so it was perhaps the most like the biggest dream come true for me, because it really did just like highlight everything that I wanted to be doing with my life at the time. It was just so incredible. I just found a community of the most passionate, wonderful, down-to-earth, interesting people I'd ever met in my life. And I was like, this is my home. These are my people. It was just so fun. And also, Jack Dumbacher and I at this time, or like during this process, which is one of the reasons why I was working with Rich Moy in a different thing, was because Jack Dumbacher was a curator of birds and mammals. And we started dating at this time and traveling to Papua New Guinea and having just extraordinary experiences trapping poisonous birds in mist nets in the highlands of Papua New Guinea for like months at a time. And so it was important for us that was separate. But after the exhibit went up, we married.
Nice.
And
so it was more than just a show for you. I mean, it was life-changing. Yeah.
It was an extremely profound event. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things that we try to do with that exhibit as well is just highlight that scientists and artists are, that's a more recent thing that is almost compartmentalized and seen as more opposites, when in fact, so many of the curators at the Academy of Science and some of the biologists that work there, some of the students have art degrees. They're extremely artistic. And I think that the thing that they have in common is that we're exploring, we're asking questions, we're discovering things. So it was a really beautiful thing during the exhibit to really explore the process of creation and I would show my drawings and we'd show the specimens and like old deep sea squids in jars and really highlight some of the older artists that have influenced me, like Ernst Haeckel, specifically because he was a scientist that would go out on ships and dredge up deep sea animals and draw them. But of course, by the time you bring something up from the bottom of the ocean, it's just a jelly, right? It's just all blah. So he used so much imagination with his work to really bring the animal to life, which I found very, very inspiring.
Very nice. Yeah, it's a description that I see a lot, and I think you even have it in your bio, but it was present in a lot of the articles that I read, was describing your style as being Autobahn on acid, which I don't know that I don't think that does it justice at all. Like when I think of acid trip, like it's very bright colors and kind of bombastic, but I get what it's getting at. I think it's conveying that you're not trying to do scientifically accurate depictions of animals and their habitat. You're mixing surrealism into it, right? And I think that's what that tagline is meant to reflect, if I understand it.
Yeah, that was just kind of like a party thing. I would joke, tease myself and like make fun of myself, kind of like, I come from Ohio where people like use very funny ways. Like, I don't know, like they make fun of themselves when they talk about themselves a little bit. So I think that that's a bit of the thing. So Mary Ellen Hannibal, who wrote that intro, she asked me if that was okay. And I was like, well, I mean, she's overheard me at parties describe my work like that. So I don't know, maybe we should edit that. But I think that I do put a lot of effort into making some of my work scientifically accurate. I think that what drives the difference between where I depart from reality is the story that I'm trying to tell. So if I'm specifically talking about the character, a specific species, it has to play into the story that I'm trying to tell. So I view myself as a storyteller first. And yeah,
and animals are like vehicles to help you tell that story, or the characters?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really the relationships that I'm talking about between the characters that I'm depicting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess in the same way that an author telling a story would, in order for that story to be believable, would have to be fairly accurate as far as how they characterize their setting and their characters and the history of those things. You have to be equally as aware of accuracy when creating your characters, or else it's not believable. That's the way I kind of read it. Is that right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's important not to be believable and to just jump off and not feel constrained by reality.
Sure.
I mean, I really do believe that the way that we interpret our existence is both based in reality and fantasy. I think that walking that line between reality and just the subconscious and the conscious, walking that line is just really interesting to me. That like building a scaffolding between the reality and the dreamscape.
And so if your main intent is to tell stories, what are the stories that you're telling? Are they about yourself? Are they about societal issues? Like, what's your main focus as far as those stories you want to tell?
I have tried to talk about anything that's interesting to me at the time. I try not to constrain myself too much. I have talked about sexual selection and desire. I've talked about feeling protecting your child. I've talked about death and loss and survival of the fittest. And really, I think that one of the things that is fascinating to me, having grown up really intimate with animals, is just how much of the basic things we share with other creatures. So I've really tried to pick away at what that means. Just really basic things that we all share, but we don't talk about. So I think it's really easy to make a pretty painting, and celebrate life and just paint birds and butterflies and flowers all the time. And I do that. I love doing that. But I also think it's important to share the whole story and talk about loss and what that means, and to feel lonely and super devastated, sad, but try to process the grief, for example, in an open-eyed, honest way.
Yeah.
I think that that's important. So it doesn't mean that the paintings always sell, but that's not why I'm doing it. It's really like a spiritual quest that I'm on to try to define my life through my work.
As big of a part as animals and nature play in your work, even if they are kind of characters or setting to tell a story, they are still very important, a component to your work. So things like climate change and humanity's impact on the world and what appears to be our approaching impending doom, not to get too Debbie Downer, but I have to imagine those are strong feelings for you, those evoke strong emotions in you. So is that something that you spend a lot of time thinking about and affected by? Does it make it into your work?
When I was a little girl, I just remember when I lived for example, in the suburbs, and we backed up on all this farmland. I remember when all the farms were selling off one by one and being slowly replaced by cookie cutter developments. And I would go around and pull the tape off of the trees so that they wouldn't cut them down. And I just have seen in my life, I'm sure you have, so much wild spaces being reduced and so much pressure put on native wildlife. So We've lost 2/3 of all the songbirds and amphibians in our lifetimes in America. And to be perfectly honest with you, I am devastated. I'm devastated. I'm heartbroken. And one way that what are you going to do, right? All you can do is like use the tools you have to try to learn as much as you can and, educate and just inspire people. I think inspiring people is one of the most effective tools. And that's where I feel that's what motivates me to keep doing what I do, is because I think that art has a very key role to play in inspiring people to take notice of these incredible diversity around us. And, I'm fighting along with all my community of scientists that I know and love and respect to do the best we can to advocate for biodiversity and preserving natural spaces, natural lands, and trying to get as many people, especially, I should say, children, to engage with the natural world. Because if they don't love nature, they're not going to protect it.
Right.
And, I want my daughter to see like songbirds when she's in her 80s, I want your children to see that too. I want like all of our children to be okay,
So do you think that that's the role that art can have as far as being an agent for change, is just providing that sort of inspiration and awareness?
Yeah, I do. 100%. That said, there are days, especially this past year, oh my God, that are hard, that are just hard. And I doubt, and I'm like, am I just like, is this just too much? But I'm, fortunately, I'm just surrounded by so many interesting artists and people and scientists that are working on it too, So, I have so much hope that we can, if anything, at least we could try, try our best, right?
For sure. So I want to talk a little bit about the way that you work. And I guess at the starting point, do you use like reference materials and photos as kind of a starting point for the journey of conceptualizing a piece?
Yeah. When I was if we rewind back to that year that I went back to Ohio in like 2002 to prepare for that 111 Minute show, I was going to the library to get a lot of reference materials. At the time, there wasn't like an online thing. I didn't have a computer. So I would like look at photos in books and redraw them on the canvas. So that process was very tedious and would take so long. And so then quickly thereafter, I just basically gave myself the excuse to travel more. And so I've traveled all over the world, and I just take my own photos, and then I turn those photos into drawings, often straight onto the woods, and then just start working on those. But often I'm working off of some of the more complicated paintings that I'm making now have like easily 300 or 400 photo references I've taken from different angles. I'm like, if I include moss in a painting, I might have 30 pictures of different kinds of moss that I'm working off of. So I try to get outdoors as much as possible, because I also think that, not only that, but I just think that if you're a more interesting person, a more interested person, your work is going to look more interesting and so sure. It's just part of the process. I just love traveling and taking my own photos and working off of those. And I also feel like when you're in nature, actually studying the thing that you're photographing, you're understanding its behavior, the way it moves, the way that the light hits the feathers, for example. And then, you just can't get that in photos all the time. So I think, along with my husband, Jack, and a lot of the scientists at the Academy, we've traveled together, and I've just been able to see so many beautiful, natural, wild places. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And I hope that I can carry some of that into my work and do some of the creatures that I'm depicting justice, because they're just so extraordinary.
So when you're going on location like that, do you come with like an agenda in mind of like, I'm seeking these specific animals that I want to try to capture, or do you just kind of show up and capture whatever you discover and whatever catches your eye?
Yeah. So my first priority is to help the scientists that I'm working with. So when I'm helping my husband, for example, I'm working, I'm checking mist nets, I'm preparing specimens for the museum's collection, I'm skinning birds, that's what that means. And then I'm learning how to, just set up the camp and cooking with them and trekking through the forest. And then I've never really been like an au pair painter where I can just like sit out there in the forest and paint. I'm more like just trying to be as open as possible to the adventure and taking photos. And then when I get back in my studio, I compile those. And then I kind of need to shut the world out around me and really just hone in on it.
Has COVID affected the ability to travel and make these expeditions? Like, has it shut that down?
Yes. I had a trip with Zariah Foreman. She curated a show aboard the Endurance ship with Lindblad and National Geographic last year. And I was going to fly out to Svalbard for the opening. That would have been a really fun experience. I've also been trying to figure out ways in the last 5 years to leverage my work for conservation. So I auctioned off a painting through Christie's auction house, I think in 2019, and the funds were matched on that donation, that painting. And with that, we were able to preserve like miles of rainforest in the Sierra Amay rainforest in Guatemala.
Nice.
And so I was going to go down to Guatemala last year and see some of the land that I helped preserve down there, which would have been amazing. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to do that. And that program was called Art into Acres, directed by Haley Mellon, a beautiful artist that lives in the Marin. So yeah, I'm just I would love to continue to travel. It's a huge part of my work, but last year just wasn't the year for it. Do
you have any coming up?
I don't, actually. I mean, I would love to get down to Guatemala, but, a lot of my travel actually piggybacks on my husband's work as well. And I think he's going to try to get back to Papua New Guinea. We also spent a lot of time in Namibia, so maybe we go back there. So
nice.
I don't know. We'll see. Oh, and the Galapagos Islands again. I might go down to Galapagos next year. Again, I love it down there.
So when you're not able to find animals, but you want to depict them, I know oftentimes you'll go to the same Academy of Sciences that you did that residency at to look at their specimens and use that as reference. So what is that process like? Like, how do you find, references when you're not able to find animals to take the pictures yourselves?
Yeah, it definitely depends on what I'm trying to paint. A lot of the research collections at the Academy of Science are not in the shape or form that I want to depict in my painting. For example, I mean, there's 100,000 birds and mammals in drawers, and they are stiff and they're like posed like this, So that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. There's the Steinhardt Aquarium has a lot of living creatures there that I photographed and worked with a lot. And because I know everybody over there, I could just kind of email them and say, hey, could I come in? Can I annoy you and take up all your time and come check out a certain creature? But I also, if there's something specifically, like I did an artist in residency program at Facebook in 2019. They said I could do a mural, which I'd never done before. So I said, well, let's do something local that we don't even know about yet, right? So I really like finding things that people don't even know about. So I found this like tiny little deep sea comb ctenophore that lives at the bottom of the ocean outside the Farallon Islands. So I went down to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and I asked, I think Steve Haddock, and I'm trying to remember the name of the other scientist that I worked with. Sorry. But they let me go backstage and just photograph all the deep sea jellies. And then I blew them up really large on the wall at the residency. And I don't know, it was just a really beautiful experience to kind of highlight something that we've, it's been living here the whole time for millennia and we don't even know about it, right? They hadn't even described it yet. They're just nicknaming it Red X because they didn't even have a name for it. So I really love kind of highlighting things like that.
So once you have collected, a number of different references, whether that's the result of going on a trip or visiting one of the local kind of aquariums or whatever, how do you typically arrive at an idea for a piece from there? You said you sort of shut yourself off from the world and try to find some inspiration from the photos. So what does that process usually look like? Are you sketching out in sketchbooks, or how do you tend to brainstorm ideas?
Yeah, I do. I sketch out a lot of my ideas and they just look horrible at first. They just look like little kid drawings with a lot of writing around it, scribbles, just like and then I just start building it in layers, like what kind of animal, what's the story, what's the point? I ask myself before every painting, what is the point? What am I trying to do here? I'm a mom. My time is very precious and it's hard to get the hours in, right? So I just have to be very deliberate now about like how I approach a painting. It's a little less like, we'll see, it's exploring in different ways, but now I have to be a little bit more deliberate with my time. So it just builds up in layers, and a lot of it I'm working out as I go. I don't want to have it too laid out because that kind of takes the fun out of it in a lot of ways. That said, I approach every painting like an opportunity to try something I've never done before. So I push myself to be uncomfortable with every painting, because if I know how to do it, then it's boring and it doesn't challenge me to grow. So I'm always trying to try some new experiments or try, just something, just enough to make it uncomfortable. Because if it doesn't keep me up a little bit at night, then I'm not pushing myself hard enough, right? And again, I really do want to be good at my craft by the time I'm 83. That's my goal. So, I guess I just kind of figure it out as I go along, That said, the way that my actual painting process is one that is not very forgiving. So the way that I paint, like, let's say I have a painting that's 2 by 3 feet. I might have a tablespoon of acrylic on the entire painting, because the way that I'm using acrylic is really like a stain. So it's like dyeing, just staining the wood so that you see the wood grain through all the paint. I guess there's some sections of paintings that I have where you just can't see the wood grain through it. But for the most part, I try to make it like integrate into the grain, So there's not a lot of room for error there, because once the paint stains the wood, it's in there, right? Yeah. You can't really sand it off. So that is challenging. And I have made a billion mistakes, and I continue to make mistakes, but that's okay, because the mistakes, I think, are really, every time it happens, it's just an opportunity to learn and to try something new, and cover it up with a really well-placed bird or something. You have to be kind of strategic. So
does that force you to do more preparation in advance of starting on the actual painting, or do you like the risks that involves?
We'll say that, like, it's interesting. So I got an iPad, and a couple years ago I did something for Apple's Start Something New campaign, and I tried their Apple Pencil in Procreate, and I'm not a technical person at all. I really want to be away from my computer and any technology, like, as much as possible. They do not make me happy. But I did find it to be really fun to use the Apple Pencil in Procreate. So the last year, I think because I was also homeschooling, it was like really hard for me to jump between like painting and sketching and homeschooling at the same time. So I started like spending a little bit more time doing my preliminary drawings on the iPad, which was actually awesome. It was really fun. And who knew it'd be so easy to erase things, wish I'd figured that out 20 years ago. But, so now I'm kind of addicted to it. So what I'll do is like the last few commissions I had, I'll just, build up layers on Procreate, and kind of work it out there a little bit and then make a drawing of it just because I want it to be back in once I like move through the drawing stage, I feel like I internalize it in a different way rather than just like making a Photoshop, like, pile of photos like on top of each other. I don't know. It just doesn't integrate. So if I can turn it into a drawing and then move into the painting stage, then that seems to be a process that's working for me right now. But, and also I had clients for some of these commissions, right? So it was important for me to be able to kind of share the process with them as I was kind of rolling through it. But to be honest with you, I really would love to just like start a painting without any drawing or idea of where it's going, and I'll get there. Now that schools are back in person, I think and I have like massive blocks of time again. I think that, I look forward to that again. But right now you just have to do the best you can with what you have,
Sure. So you mentioned that you use sort of a watered down acrylic as your medium. How did you develop that? And I guess what motivated you to go with acrylic, but then also have this sort of watered down, technique?
That started in 2000. When I first moved to San Francisco, I had some friends, they were all skaters and they were throwing out their old decks. And I said, "Hey, wait, I'm a dumpster diver. I just hate to throw anything out. I always want to repurpose everything. Like give me a full day to like resand a cabinet and repaint it." And I'm like so happy. I just like hate throwing things away. So they had these old decks and I sanded them down and just started leaving some of the wood grain exposed. And I didn't have that much money and I really wanted my paints to last. So I just watered it down so that I could like preserve my paints as much as possible. And then I really liked it. It looked kind of cool. So then some of the first paintings that I showed in San Francisco, I show a lot of the wood grain and just use as little paint as possible. And I also, being a nature groupie, I just love that each panel of wood is so unique and it's really a marker. It was alive, right? It's just the physical marker of time and sunshine and water. And I think that there's something really beautiful about that. I mean, I've made hundreds of paintings and every single panel that I work on, it's just so beautiful. It's so different. And most of the wood that I experimented in the beginning with different kinds of woods, and I really early settled on maple. Because the grain is so tight that you don't get these like grooves. And because once you get a groove, the paint will get in there and just kind of spider out, which is not fun because then you can't even get in there to sand it. So I work with maple exclusively. So for like 18 years, I've been working with Francisco Robles, who is a custom woodworker in San Francisco. And he is just my wood wizard. He's just amazing. I work on A1 apple ply panels. So they're really strong and they're layered wood like a skateboard deck. So then you don't get any bubbles under the veneer. And then I sand it down with like 320 to 600 grit. So it's super smooth like paper. And then of course he builds all the custom frames for it.
Nice.
Yeah. I was really fortunate to meet him early on. And he's taught me so much about how to work with wood. And then when I'm done with every painting, I take it over to him and he spray varnishes it with a clear lacquer to protect it from UV rays and temperature fluctuations and moisture and whatnot. So
very nice. It's a good relationship to have.
it is.
So like how much do the individual like characteristics of the grain of a specific panel matter to you? Like, do you pick out specific panels because, hey, that grain would work well with the composition I'm trying to come up with?
Absolutely. I have a whole pile of wood in the back. I'm pretty low, you see in the background here. I do have a large selection of panels on hand, and with every painting, I take them all out, I spread them out, and I think about the flow of the grain, and some of them have like swirls in places I don't want there to be too much energy getting locked up in a certain section of the painting. So I'm thinking about the eye flowing and just the flow and the energy of a painting. And I think that the grain is very important to me for that reason. Sometimes the green, I'm thinking of a few paintings that I made in 2017 for my last show at Joshua Liner Gallery, where the grains were just so beautiful on these panels that I received that I just could not stomach covering them up. So, I mean, the paintings were quite simple because the grain was so beautiful. I just wanted to highlight that. But so yeah, it is an important factor to me for sure.
You also will often work very large. So I guess, what is it that you like about working so large? Is there something unique about that experience for you?
I also enjoy painting really, really tiny things, like very miniature paintings as well. So I think what I like is, after so many years of doing this, you just have to, in order to learn to be, really good at your craft, you have to challenge yourself to do things, again, that are uncomfortable. And so it's difficult to paint really large, really fast, but to know that you can do it. And there's a certain energy to that to me is very liberating and fun. I just did a painting for a private commission along a stairwell of a blue heron, very simple, just a blue heron, but I tried to do it in under 2 weeks, and it's like 15 feet long. And it was just so fun to just kind of loosen up and use my whole shoulders when I'm working. And then I also enjoy trying to create a more complicated story in as simply as I can in a very miniature painting. So I just like pushing myself and challenging myself. And I have a lot of tiny brushes in my studio, but I have some bigger ones as well. So I think it's just, I like the range. I like the diversity,
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned that painting in the stairwell, and you also talked earlier about the mural you did for Facebook. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your experience doing murals. So I mean, that first one that you did for Facebook, tell me about that. That was your first mural, wasn't it?
Yeah, and this is the first of two, right? I've only done two. I don't think that this is something I want to do, like murals necessarily, because frankly, I just really like being alone in my studio too much. It's too comfortable here. I can just work in my PJs and, but yeah, I think that what I'm looking for, if I have an opportunity to do something, is to find as much freedom as I possibly can. So I say no to a lot of things, but I'm more likely to take on a project if I have free reign to do whatever I want. The Facebook project was awesome because Christian had known about my work for many years. She knew kind of what I did, and so she said, we just want a mural around this whole elevator shaft. So it's like 4 walls, 10 feet long. Just do whatever you want. And I was like, oh, my favorite words. So, yeah, but so I just saw it as an opportunity to sort of highlight something that, I think is kind of magical that we don't even know is here. This is just, we know about all these other amazing creatures around us. Everybody knows them. We love the spotted owls that live around us. We love them so much. And all the other things that we just kind of associate with the Bay Area. But we have so many things that we don't even know about. And so that was really driving that decision to kind of highlight some of the deep sea creatures. I mean, how would we know? We're not like diving in the deep sea around the Farallones. Unfortunately, that would be amazing.
Did your process for developing those mural compositions differ much from what you normally do in the studio as far as how you conceptualized it?
No, I would say that the Facebook experience was very in line with how I typically work. The latest one that I did with the blue heron was definitely different because we were working with a large team of people who had different opinions. So we just kept getting pushed back to the drawing board and back and forth and back and forth. And then in the very end, we just decided to do something very simple up the wall. And we had run out of time. So I just did that bird, which in the end, I think it turned out pretty good. I thought it looked pretty good flying up the staircase. Like, I don't know. I think blue herons are really beautiful. And it was fun to just paint a really big bird. It's naturally large, really large. So yeah, that was a great experience. Well, Ellie Gainey helped me with that. That was my first time I'd ever hired an assistant, Ellie Gainey. And she just really came through for me on that one. She was great. So, and it was fun to learn how to operate a scissor lift, which I totally want. I would love to have a scissor lift. But, yeah. So yeah, they were different. They were different. That I would love to do another mural at some point, but like I've just been kind of in the zone of the past few years, especially having had back-to-back solo shows in galleries for so long that, I have these shows in these white galleries, and really the whole point of these paintings are to like motivate and inspire people to connect with the outdoors, to be in nature. And it just seems like, I don't know, to do it in such a white, sterile space is almost like, it's just, I don't know. So I'm really inspired to try to find different ways to get people to engage with the natural world. So like last year, I did a children's book about trees to try to inspire kids to notice the nature around them, notice different diversity of trees around them. I just wanted to start there because, even little kids living in urban areas in the middle of a pandemic, even the playgrounds are closed. They could at least look out their window or walk down the street and see trees, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that came out earlier this year, right? With Simon
that's
Schuster?
coming out. Yeah, that I worked on it last year during the pandemic while I was homeschooling, which was so hard. It was so hard, but it's coming out next month.
Okay.
We're really excited. October. Thought it was going to be this month, and it's not. It's going to be next month. So yeah, I just wanted to try new things, and I'd really love to. Yeah, I'm just trying to open myself up to new opportunities to just see if I can, maybe show my paintings outdoors. Maybe just a little. Maybe we'll see. I have a couple things up my sleeve.
Yeah. With this new book, being more, you're working with another person, somebody's writing, you're doing illustration, which is a bit different than what you did with like your monograms. Did that, I guess, was that an adjustment? Did it change the way that you worked in order to kind of collaborate with the writer?
Yeah, I realized very early on in my career that I just have so much admiration for illustrators. I really do. I think that is such a hard job. And when I am just like a horrible illustrator, if my heart isn't in it, if my heart's in it, I can do it, but it's not as easy for me as I think it would be, for basically any other artist. I don't know. Because my heart was so into this project and I was just like so motivated, to inspire kids about trees. It wasn't as hard. And the folks that I worked with, the art director at Simon Schuster, were just absolutely lovely people to work with. And they really gave me free rein to do whatever I wanted. So it was a glorious experience. And I might do another children's book with them about hummingbirds next year. We're talking about it. So I might like have a little side branch of children's books. I am a mother. I think it's really important to get kids outdoors again. So that is a huge motivation that keeps me going. So I would love to do more of that. But then I also, I rely on and just need to process my existence through my brushes. So I will continue to make paintings, and how I show those is kind of up in the air. I'm not represented by a gallery right now. I'm just kind of taking some time off.
Very cool. So in addition to that book that we just talked about, you've had two other books, more kind of traditional monograms through Ginkgo Press.
Yeah.
Drawn by Instinct was in 2012, and then Unnatural Selection in 2019. So how did you first connect with the Ginkgo Press and get those projects going?
Because they're in the Bay Area. They're located in Berkeley. They also keep a really sharp ear to the local art scene in California. And so they had known about my work for several years and reached out to me and asked me if they could publish a book of my work in 2012. I've made a lot of paintings, so it was no problem just like filling the book with most of them. But then, 6 years goes by and I like emailed them again and I'm like, hey, I have enough to fill another book if you want to do another book. And they're like, let's do it. So, I hope I just love books so much. I mean, my house is just a library. I just love them. I love the physicality of, I think that's one of the things that I don't appreciate about working on the computer is I'm just such a tactile person. I have to touch everything, and I just love the physicalness of a painting that exists in the world. They're heavy, they take time, they're unique. There's nothing else like it in the world, you know?
Yeah.
And
100%.
so I love books too, right? And I also feel like there's so much about my work that's about the connection between the different things that I'm talking about. And, you know, even when I have a show, I see the continuity from other shows previously. But, you know, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to publish my work in a book, because I think that they create a dialogue between themselves amongst the pages of a book, and to kind of have that conversation, hold it in your hands. I think that that's a beautiful thing. I love books.
So like how much of for both of those experiences, how much of the work, like layout and design, was on your shoulders versus kind of relying on them to do that stuff?
On the first book, I was really, really fortunate. On both of them, they're just the guys, David and they're just absolutely wonderful people to work with. I just love Ginkgo Press so much. They're just wonderful people. So they just kind of let me find my own designer. And the first designer that I went with and drawn by instinct was a very close friend that I went to high school with. His name is Garrett Sunt, and he's a phenomenal designer. And so we worked really closely on that book. We wanted it to kind of be a nod to the past, a little bit vintage looking, like Victorian. And so he really helped me bring that aesthetic to life in that book. The last book, I worked with Lindsay Crawford, another local designer, and she just made it look so beautiful. I'm really grateful to her as well. So we even put a lovely poem in the center of the book, and Mary Ellen Hannibal wrote the intro to the book, which was just exquisite. She's an amazing science writer. So she was able to articulate my work in a way that I really struggle to talk about my work. So I really appreciated the time that she took and the energy she put into that intro as well. So it was just
awesome.
Yeah, it was just a great experience. So
very cool. So what does the rest of 2021 look like for you?
This is a very important time for me. I'm so excited. I have cleared everything off of my schedule, so I can just paint whatever I want.
Nice.
I'm so excited. I don't have any deadlines. I'm just going to paint whatever I want. And I think that, like, especially after the last couple of years where it was just like so tight, so many deadlines, so much pressure. And after years of like filling up galleries in LA and New York, it's just so nice to be able to say, and like, what do I want to paint? And really just play and experiment without the pressure. I think I just want to goof off. And I don't even know if will show any of the stuff that I make. And even if I did, I wouldn't want to admit it to myself right now, because I think what I'm really trying to cultivate in myself right now is to just experiment and play without the pressure of showing it, without, I think when you do this for as long as I've been doing it, and you support yourself doing it, it becomes a job. It's a job I love, and I defend it, and I work really hard at it. But it's also, you can lose a piece of like the childlike curiosity of it. And so I just want to play. That's it. I just want to play.
That's awesome.
And have fun with it. And I could find elements of that in every painting that I've made up until now. So it's not like it wasn't there. But I don't know, just kind of want to, yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Very cool. So where can people find you online to stay up to date with what you got going on?
Instagram's probably the one and only place. So I'm at I think it's t.bozic, maybe. Okay.
It is, yeah.
Okay, t.bozic. I'm not very good at updating it, but I'm going to try to get better. And it just takes so much time,
Yeah, it does.
It just does. And my website, I'm trying to have my website redone right now because it's sadly out of date. My website is my name, www.tiffanybozic.com. And yeah, just stay tuned.
Awesome.
Maybe we'll have something new and fun. We'll see.
Very cool. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Have you had Isabella Kirkland on yet?
I have not, no.
So I listened to the episode you did with Jane Kim, who is a local public art / mural artist that I love dearly. She's an exquisite artist, absolutely amazing. She also recommended Isabella Kirkland to you. So Izzy is a family to me. She is like the most beautiful, wonderful friend to me and our family. She is also, in my opinion, just like a god of the brushes. She really makes these exquisite Dutch paintings, but that they take her a year each, like full-time painting. They're just masterful. Nobody can paint like her. She's just, I'm singing her praises, and I get awful clamped talking about her because I love her so much. But she has, they're so fascinating. She just did a painting that I really love of walking stick eggs blown up really large, and so you really see the diversity between the different eggs. And they just look like ancient pottery. They're exquisite. But there's so many layers to her work as well. She did a whole series of paintings about things on the brink of extinction. But then, so she also celebrates the biodiversity. I'm trying to think, there's so many different paintings she's done, but I just highly recommend looking her up. Her name is Isabella Kirkland, and she is just an absolute delight to talk to. So inspiring, so fascinating. And yeah, I would just look forward to listening to that interview.
Awesome. Well, great choice. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tiffany, for coming on the show. I really appreciate this. It's
such
a lot of fun.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. This is really fun.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tiffany. It was really interesting to me to hear about how Tiffany developed her craft after dropping out of school and moving to San Francisco. The way that she was able to learn these, super important life and career lessons from the wonderful community of artists that she'd surrounded herself with. That, along with her own internal pursuits, provided her with possibly an even more meaningful and relevant education than she might have otherwise had she continued with art school. But of course, without the, crippling student debt. Education should be a right. Everybody learns in their own way, and so her journey may not be what works for everybody, but it certainly worked really well for her. And I'm excited about this new period of exploration and experimentation that she's going into. Just giving herself the freedom to paint whatever she wants to, in whatever form that she wants, without being burdened with external deadlines, expectations, or constraints. When an artist is able to give themselves that freedom, it really unlocks some incredible potential. Even previous guests like Chris and Cooper talked about how that's one of the reasons why they like to still have commercial work, is so that they can disconnect their craft from that burden of supporting them financially and, appreciating the freedom and creativity that allows for, or at least makes them feel more comfortable with. So I'm eager to see what might come from that if she does end up sharing some of it. So thanks again to Tiffany for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.